And so, yeah, are you someone who wants to be putting a ton of time and effort and work into achieving these athletic goals, working with your team, get into that top level? Are you committed to working at that level? And also, can you do that as a really high functioning student athlete? And that's a question that we often get as recruiting coaches is like, is there um, can I be in pre med, or can I be an engineer, or can I double major in IR and Spanish? And the answer to all of those at Bucknell is absolutely yes, you can do that. But then if someone says, is that doable? Say, sure. Is it easy? No, no, absolutely not. No one's going to sit here and tell you that being a really top tier athlete and student is going to be easy. It takes a ton of time management and hard work, and these athletes are working, just all day long.
Cool. Let's do it. All right. For everyone listening, we have Katy Ruderman here, head coach, Bucknell University women's rowing. And I'm very excited to talk to Katy. I got to know her a few years back. We did a recruiting panel together for the IRCA talking about recruiting specifically for men's rowing. And then here we are 2 years later. Katy is the head coach of women's rowing at Bucknell, coming from her time at Hobart up in New York. And I'm very excited to talk to Katy because I know, first off, her experience as a coach at various different programs, both on the women's front and on the men's front, her depth of knowledge in the recruiting cycle or just understanding of recruiting, I think is going to be very helpful. And the opportunity to talk to her as she just gets started here at Bucknell, becoming the head coach, I believe in July of this year, and kind of just starting her journey leading the charge at a school I've heard really, really good things about for years. I'm excited to dive in. So Katy, with that, let's kick things off. Just talk a little bit about where we are in the fall. It's, what are we? Can't believe we're already 2 weeks into November, and kind of closing out the fall season or the fall semester as a whole. Talk a little bit about just where we are in the timeline of you and Bucknell and getting your start with the new program. We'll talk a little bit about your kind of intro to coaching here in a little bit. But before we even get to that, just talk about where we are in the season. I know that racing just finished up a few weeks ago, but give us a little idea of what's to come.
Sure. I mean, it's been a fantastic fall here at Bucknell. I got to meet the team in August when I got introduced to them and set up calls with everyone. And they were all so very clear from the start on an individual basis that their big goals were to move up within the conference and to work on team culture. So team culture is good, speed's good, but like those are the big things we want to focus on. And it was neat to hear that from pretty much every single person on the team was really aligned on their goals and what the team goals were and how they wanted to contribute to those. So that's been our big focus this fall. And so it was great to see them jump into training, with a new coach and listening to, different ways of talking about the stroke and different ways of just, communicating and running things. But they've been so adaptive and excited about what we're doing and where they want to go. And so it's been a great fall of racing. We kept it pretty low key in terms of racing. We entered at 8 in the Charles, and the team hadn't been since 2019. So there was quite a few folks in that boat who'd never got to race at the Charles before. So that was a really cool experience. They did well. They got I was hoping for not the full racing experience of, a penalty and, some racing incidents, but they got it all. They checked all the boxes, finished in the top half. They had a fantastic time. So they did it all. And then had a really great race, the Princeton Chase too. That most people got to race in 8s and in the second round in the small boats. So I did a ton of racing that day. It was a great way to cap off the competitive season this fall. We're getting out there for regattas. And then we've got a couple more weeks left of training here on campus.
What's as you kind of kick things off, and just, with the racing season and all that, like, what do these next few weeks of practice look like, right? So racing season, right, was probably, hey, like you're, for you as a new coach, you're just diving into, getting to know the team and developing the culture with probably some of, the areas that you want to start to incorporate over the long run. What do these, as racing season comes to a close a week ago, right, when the Princeton Chase was, what do these next few weeks look like, I guess, before finals? Are you guys practicing up until finals? What does that look like? Shed some light on what the, kind of like pre-off season before it's like a true kind of winter break mode begins. What does that look like for a Division I program like yourself?
Yeah, we're in the full swing of training still. So really training hasn't changed. The big difference for us right now is that just with the time change, we lose the light like every other rowing program who is upset every fall that happens. Go figure. So we've got folks who can go get on the water in the early afternoon if they don't have classes, and then everyone else ergs at the usual time for our practice because we practice in the early evenings, I guess. Um, and they are still training full time, but the big focus now has been on technique and about thinking about how do we get everyone really on the same page with technique going into the winter training portion of the year when they're doing more training on their own over break, but then also getting ready for the Florida training trip. We had a pretty chilly row yesterday, and people were feeling a little cold out there, but also realizing that we've got a couple more rows left here in Pennsylvania, and then we get to go row in Florida in January. So they were feeling pretty excited about that and just about continuing to build fitness, build the base, and focus on the goals for the spring. So it's been a big part of our conversations this month is like, what are the team goals, and where do everyone's goals fit into that? Because it's one thing to sit around in summer and fall and say, like, here's where we want to go in May, here's how we want to perform at the end of the school year. But it's quite another to figure out how do we start to put those building blocks together. What do we do today? What do we do next week? What do we do when we're home over break? What do we do on that Florida training trip to get to where we want to be in May? So that's been a big part of the conversation too, is like, what are we doing right now, practice that gets us to there?
What does that so obviously love the fact that you guys go away in January, get out of the I'm here in Philadelphia, you're in more kind of central Pennsylvania. We both know what the Northeast brings, or what the Northeast is in the winter. So when I was coaching, we used to go down to Florida for a winter training trip in January as well, down to Miami. What does that look like? Where are you guys heading for your winter? Is that something that was existing kind of prior to you starting to coach there? Like, shed some light on like a winter training trip like that. Like, is it like a full team thing? Or is there, a portion of the athletes? I think it'd be helpful for high school athletes who never have the opportunity to, kind of go on a trip like that in high school. A lot of, programs do have the ability to go on winter training trips. Shed some light on that. What does that look like in January?
Yeah, so we're going to Vero Beach this year, which was a recommendation from one of the coaches I worked with this summer. And it actually turns out that there's a Bucknell alum who's at the boathouse. So when I reached out, they were super excited to welcome us down there. And so we're going to be there for a week of training right before classes start. The big focus will be getting on the water, doing all that technical work that's hard to do when it's cold up here in the Northeast, Mid Atlantic, and we can't be doing all those stationary drills and focusing on that. So we'll get to do quite a bit of technical work, quite a bit of work too on selection, think about how we build into the spring. And for us, that's really the focus of the trip. The trip is not to go down there and use the ergs. We want to make sure that we really get in as many strokes as we possibly can. And so the team had taken a trip in the past, but I'm excited to be going to a new location in Florida, and hopefully get a lot of miles in the water that'll launch us into the spring season because the docks typically go back in here in February. So we'll have a couple more weeks back on the erg before we get back on the water after that trip.
Yeah. Oh man, I love winter training trips. They're great, and they're, I think, in many ways just how they set up the start to the spring semester when you're coming back in January. Classes begin, but it's still, at least again up here in the Northeast, cold and dark, and to have that kind of like jolt of rejuvenation, being in the sun and rowing and being on the water makes January and February fly by in a much different way. So I love that. What I want to shift gears a little bit. Just, we're going to dive into more on Bucknell, and also recruiting and all these different things. But I'd be really curious just to hear from you. Like, you've been coaching a long time. You spent time, at multiple college programs, some high school, coaching as well. And obviously now you're here, which I believe is kind of your first full head coaching collegiate Division I position, at least on the women's side. What did that journey look like? How'd you get into coaching? Shed some light on just these last, like, what did that journey, to being right here as you take the reins at Bucknell, shed some light on kind of that journey to where we're sitting today.
Sure. I learned to row when I was in high school in the Boston area, and I coached that same high school program for about 10 years. Brookline High School, and I just absolutely loved it. I started coaching when I was in college. I rowed for a short amount of time, and realized that really coaching was what I wanted to be doing. And I just absolutely loved getting to work with, especially, at that time, thinking about high school athletes, young athletes who have these big goals and aspirations, and work from where they are to think about how they can get there. And so the same conversations that we're having here at Bucknell were pretty key in coaching juniors for a long time. And so thinking about how do we get individuals in the team to their goals. I also got to work with pre-elite athletes at Riverside at that point. So working with both programs and getting to see, all the differences and similarities. At the end of the day, it's just rowing, and we're, doing a lot of the same stuff in different programs at a different level. And so loved coaching at the high school level, working with all those athletes in Boston. But I also knew that I was looking for another challenge at some point. So after I'd been there for about a decade, I went back to college. Turns out you can't coach at the college level without a college degree. For anyone out there who has not yet finished college, just to put that out there. So I went back to college. I went to night school. I finished up my degree, and then was able to start coaching at GW. And so accepted that position and did a ton of recruiting there. And again, getting to work with athletes and thinking about how do they get from where they are to those big goals. And so got to really take control of the recruiting there. And I was lucky to get ownership of it from the head coach and just get to run with it, and work with so many fantastic athletes coming into the program, and then coaching them while they're there, and then see their success afterwards, was quite a lot of fun. And so I also worked at Potomac Boat Club while I was there, did some, again, pre-elite coaching. And then I've been looking for, I spent a lot of my career working with high school boys, and I was working with college women. So I guess I ended up shifting back to the men's side again, going to Hobart, and worked there for a couple of years, and really enjoyed my time working with Paul Bugenhagen. He was really the reason why I ended up there, and had so much fun working there. And he was also the one who encouraged me to go out for this job. He had worked at Bucknell some time ago, and had only the most amazing things to say about it. And so throughout the interview process this summer, getting to learn about this program, about the support, the athletes, how much the school, the administration is really behind athletics, and the pushing all the teams to perform really well within the Patriot League, but also putting student athlete wellness first. Like, their goal is really to have a happy, healthy, and really excited department, and making sure those people can then perform to the best of their abilities.
I love that. And I think, shout out to Paul Bugenhagen, who I really I've had a few times to learn under, and really love his energy as a rowing coach. And, would love to get him on at some point. He's the man. Has been invited, so hopefully we'll get him on soon. But, the shout for him is amazing. And, the connection to Bucknell. But I think I want to go back even further. Your time at Brookline High School in Massachusetts, right? I'm very curious, like, what latched you on to leading that program? It was your alma mater. It's where you went to. You spent 10 years there. Like, I'm curious for anyone, because a lot of high school coaches listen to this as well, but like, what was the connection to there, besides the emotional connection of, representing your high school program, that kept you there for that 10 years? Like, is it, I'm just curious, take that wherever you want, but like, there's a reason why you stayed there for so long and stayed in that position. And when we think of high school coaching careers, in the sense of being there for, greater than 5 years, 10 years, even, like, what latched you on? Like, what was it about that team and that program that kept you there for that extended period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really was the athletes and the goals that they were going for. I mean, I had a number of boats perform incredibly well at youth nationals and at our state championship, and so it was always so neat to like see that the athletes come into the year and have those goals and think about how they wanted to build towards those goals, and then for the athletes who were not graduating, like, how do they go back and do that again? And so it always felt like there was another phenomenal class coming up that I was just so excited to work with, and thinking about where do they want to go? How can they do this? And also it was a program of, I was working with the varsity boys directly, but also as the program director, we typically had at least 120, sometimes up to almost 150 athletes on the program. And so it was a great way to introduce new athletes to a sport that they hadn't gotten to see before. And we know that rowing it's so rare to have it still at the high school level, especially scholastic. And take Massachusetts, for example, there's well over 300 public high schools. And when I left, we had about 22, I think, public high school rowing programs. So to be in a town that has that access, that has the support of the school, that has the support of the families that are behind the program, is just incredible. So it was just such a cool place to be, to get to work with athletes who were so excited about what they were doing, but also to have that integration with the school and get to meet on a regular basis with folks, guidance counselors, and teachers, and people who were supporting them in all these different ways, and to really be part of the campus culture there, which I think is more typical at the collegiate level, but not something that you often get in junior coaching. So I think it's really special to be at a school that is so supportive of their athletics, and a lot of credit goes to the old athletic director there, who was just a huge proponent of all the programs, and especially rowing, which is just, when we're within athletic departments, we know that we're a little bit complex and different, and nobody else has to drive boat trailers and figure out how to work a launch and problem solve when things get broken out on the water. But rowing is one of those sports that I think a administration can really get behind, and it can make a huge difference in some young people's lives.
That's so cool because I think, and I want to speak on that for just another minute, but I'm in Philadelphia, and Boston, Philadelphia, so many programs, or so such a big rowing presence, and just again see someone with that kind of support at a high school, like you said, that is in some cases a rarity, where you kind of have the sport or the support of the high school in kind of guiding the program as well. And it's really kind of integrated into the fabric, much like any other of the athletic sports. I think in a lot of ways, especially I see it here in Philly, like a lot of the teams are clubs, and they're, kind of like self-funded and this and that. And maybe there's elements of that with the program that you're coming from, but it's tough to sustain. It's tough to keep retention with coaches and all these different things. And the fact that you were, part of a program that maybe seems like it was well supported. Again, I think that's really interesting. And I'd be curious, that's a cool experience. And right. Like anything else on that front that was just in the support of the any tips on high school coach, while we talk about that here in a set for a minute, but being there for that long, anything that you would say as a high school coach who was there for that long, where that you felt kind of were things that made you more successful at that level for that long and that duration, any again, take that wherever you want, but anything that for the high school coaches out there who are part of a program that maybe feels maybe they aren't as supported in the same way, just take that wherever you want, or maybe they are supported and they just need to learn how to kind of leverage the resources a little bit better.
Well, I think you said it really well. I mean, coach retention is a huge piece of it, and I feel like the first couple of years were tough, and I was young and still figuring out how to run that program. But for the last bunch of years that I was there, I had a men's and women's JV coach, and then a women's varsity coach. So the four main squads that we were working with, and actually novice coaches too, who stuck around for quite some time. So not to count them out, but we had a lot of excellent coaches who stuck around for a number of years. And I think as a director of a program like that, that's really tough to do. It comes down to having folks who have that flexible schedule, because we know too that when people are coaching at the high school level, it's usually not their full-time gig, and so it's tough to keep people around. And so it's finding people who have other jobs that work really well, but it's also about really paying them well and making it a great environment where they can learn and grow, and that they can have the experience they want. So I had a fantastic group of coaches that worked with me for a bunch of years there, some of whom who are still there, some who are still in the Boston area, some who are coaching at the college level now, and all are still great friends of mine, because it was such a fantastic experience. And it wasn't all rainbows and everything wasn't perfect, but we had so much fun and really loved working with that team together. And I think that makes all the difference, because if they're constant coach turnover, makes it just so much more complicated, and also it doesn't keep the student athletes engaged when they have a new coach all the time. And coach turnover is natural. It's not to say that it's an issue, but I think that when you can keep people around, they can have those relationships and they can build over the course of a couple of years, it makes an enormous difference for everyone involved.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love that, and I think like there's those factors that I think any high school coach or program director or parent who is part of the board at a program or just like can be take some of that information and kind of run with it and support, because again there's so many programs out there that I think could benefit from that. Shifting gears a little bit, but bridging on that topic, where I think you've been around so long, you in the coaching world and recruiting and kind of being a piece to the rowing equation for athletes as they kind of bridge that gap from high school to college level rowing. And whether it is as a high school, coach getting to be able to see the development of 100 plus athletes on a yearly basis, and then also shifting to the other side of the phone where your job is now to hopefully make them aware of the benefits of your programs and this and that, and trying to find the right athletes that fit your programs, whether that is prior programs or here now at Bucknell. What do you feel like, and again this is kind of bridging into a full on kind of conversation regarding a lot of the recruiting just recruiting and things like that. What do you feel like are things that you know, you saw as a high school coach, and then as a, when you first started as a, in the recruiting process as a college coach, what do you feel like are things that athletes, that you were able to sense that like, hey, this is an athlete who I think can go off and row in college, or, as a recruiting quarter, hey, these are athletes that I think can be here and be, or come here and be successful. What do you think are some things that like you were able to kind of notice in your early years as a coach that you were like, hey, like I think this is an athlete who can go off and row at a GW or a Hobart or now a Bucknell? Like, what are some of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, and the same conversations that I have with the recruits here at Bucknell, is about their drive and their interests, and so like understanding that their stats, so like their ERG score and their academics and their height and all of those stats that we always look at. Those are the things that kind of start those conversations. But then making sure that they are the kind of folks who are super driven and excited about the team goals, want to be a part of that, people who really want to keep pushing themselves forward within the sport. Those are people who are going to be really successful rowing in college. And I also, as a Division One coach, I think we're all looking for the cream of the crop to come, row at our programs, and we want the best of the best, athletically and academically. We want these fantastic people, but there's also a spot for every single rower from high school to row in college. And so it's not just about the top person in every program can go row in college, but there's so many different phenomenal places where you can row in college that it's just about finding that balance of academics and athletics. And for some people, that's club and it's Division 3 and it's Division 2 and Division 1. Like there's so many different options. And so it's about really looking and understanding kind of what the landscape of collegiate rowing looks like to know where those options are. But for me, thinking about people looking to compete at that top level, it's really about them being interested in where the team is going, and also wanting to contribute to that. Because this is a team now that is, in a new era. We've got different goals, we've got a different direction, and the team's very excited about that. But I also want recruits who are super excited about that, and so people who are thinking about what their role within the team is going to be is really huge, because I always find that recruits who are thinking about truly what does their life look like, and not just where's the school and what time is practice, and what are the classes like all of those standard things make a lot of sense, and thinking through those makes a lot of sense. But then also, who do they want to be on the team, and where do they want to fit within the team? Are you someone who wants to come in and be fighting for a spot within the NCAA squad? Are you someone who wants to come in and be competitive for the varsity 8? Are you someone who is going to be shooting to make the roster and see what you can do with that? And then what are your team culture contributions? Are you someone who is interacting with everyone on a daily basis, checking in with teammates? Are you someone who is up at the front leading warmups? Are you someone who is going in to do extra work and letting other people know and bringing them along? What's your contribution? And so thinking about who those people are and who they want to be within their collegiate team is going to be a lot of who they are within their high school team, but just to bring it up a notch. And so that's really, I think, the key for me is those people who know how they want to go through college, and not that they've got everything figured out. Anyone who tells you at 16 they've got it all figured out, I think they can always like rethink it and think about how they want to go through college. But I like those folks who really have a sense of like who they want to be with on the team. I think those are going to be really successful collegiate athletes.
Yeah, that's and this kind of kind of as we kick off our recruiting conversation, I made a post and did like a solo episode last week regarding like kind of like just things that I think are helpful in the recruiting process that people can, parents and athletes specifically can kind of lean on as they navigate this process. Because when you look at college rowing, and you kind of said it right, like there's, if you want to row in college, there's going to be a program out there for you. The question is, at what level? Is it the right fit? What do you want your college rowing experience to look like? And one of the truths that I kind of made in that, I brought to the forefront was Division I rowing is not for everyone. And
100%.
right? And I think that's one of the things that I think when you think about rowing, you either think of it as this, rowing in college. It's hey, like either I'm going to row, I have to row Division I, or I'm not going to, or rowing's not for me. And I think shedding some light on the fact that that's actually not the case. There actually are opportunities out there, whether it's D3 or club or whatever it may be, or even different layers within, Division I. I think, when you look at Division I rowing, there's 90 plus NCAA Division I women's rowing programs. If we're speaking specifically about women's rowing, the athletes who are looking to row at, grand final type programs are going to look a little bit different than the athletes who, are looking to row at, some of the programs that are vying for an NCAA spot, some of the other programs that are trying to win the conference. Everyone has different goals. And through that, you need athletes that kind of fit the fabric of what, you're trying to create as a head coach. But athletes should be kind of aware, like there are different tiers within, and what do you want your college rowing experience to look like? Like you said, are you the athlete who's, putting in the extra work or leading the charge, with the stretches, or someone that athletes can lean on from a leadership position? Like take that wherever you want, but kind of using that as kind of like the backstop, just, where Division I rowing, like, and you probably sense a lot of this in your conversations now and through your conversations as a college coach. Like what are like pillars that you believe are, kind of things that make a Division I rower a Division I rower at the high school level that you're sensing, where it's like, these are things that I'm looking for as a coach? Again, you highlighted a bunch of them, but narrow in a little bit on competitive Division I rowing, where you're in it to win conference championships and go off to NCAAs and all these things, right? That's why we're in it. Like narrow it down a little bit. Like what are characteristics that you feel make a high school athlete successful at the college level for 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think, coming from any high school program, you need to be one of the absolute top athletes there. You need to be one of the most competitive. You also need to be one of the people who, when the coach says like, "Hey, it'll be great if you get some extra training this week," you're the one absolutely going down to the boathouse or going for the run, or again, bringing teammates with you to bring them in, but really leading the charge on everything to be always pushing the envelope and thinking about what else could you do to make your boat faster? What else could you do to make you faster? What else can you do to push the program forward? And so athletes who are always asking those questions, that's a Division I athlete. Because a Division I athlete has to be pretty exceptional. And so thinking about who are the hardest workers in those programs, and then also the ones who are always the ones moving that top boat. Anytime I hear from one of the athletes here that, oh, I should really talk to this person who's at their high school, she's the hardest worker I know, I think that's who we want. Absolutely. Because if that is not something you're saying about someone, that's someone who's going to have a tough time Division I. Because, thinking about every level you're just talking about, is this a grand final crew? Is this a crew that is vying for a conference championship or NCAA slot? These are all teams who are operating at a really high level. And so all of those athletes within them need to be operating at that high level. And so thinking about what are the ways that we can keep pushing? And we had a great conversation recently here about culture and goals. And one of the athletes mentioned something about like, I don't want to get to the end of the year and think like, what else could we have done? And I really like that sentiment. And I think that's always something that I've seen within really successful crews and teams that I've worked with is what else can we do? What else can we be thinking about? What else can we optimize? And that goes for everything. It's thinking about training, it's thinking about the equipment, it's thinking about the sleep and nutrition and hydration and stretching and PT and like everything you're thinking about, team culture. But how do we do the best that we can in every single one of these areas so that we can get to the end of the year and say, absolutely, that's as fast as we could have been. And if you do that and you don't quite hit your goals, that's still a pretty fantastic place to be. You can be really proud of that effort and that result. Sometimes tough when that's where you come up. But if you're able to really do everything possible, that's a great place to be as a program and as a coach and really as an athlete. I mean, those are the athletes.
Yeah, and it sounds like in some capacity, like in some ways, you're describing what I call a contributor to a Division One program. And I think one of the things that I always kind of like to say is like, just because you can get you can go to a Division One program and be a part of the rowing team, are you actually contributing to that rowing team in the sense of, and again, that can come in very different, frames and lenses and this and that, right? There's contributing in different ways other than, boat performance and team performance. But we're gonna go that route, boat performance and team performance, because you want to be in a top boat in some capacity. You want to go to the big races like head of the Charles and NCAAs, or be in the top boat at the conference championships. Like, what are like questions that athletes at the high school level should be asking themselves? I love this question. I've asked this a few times in the 70 plus episodes that we've done on here. But what are questions that athletes at the high school level should be asking themselves to understand or to verify if Division One rowing is the college experience that they're looking for? And examples could be like, you guys are practicing right now all the way until finals. You have, you were highlighting before before we started record, right? You had lift this morning, and then you have practice this afternoon. Kind of 20-hour weeks is kind of like the limit of organized practice that you're able to do. But a lot of teams are taking advantage of that, right? They're trying to maximize their time with the athletes that they're allowed. Balancing academics and athletics, right? Bucknell's no joke on the academic front, right? So you got to know how to handle that. What are questions that athletes should be asking themselves to understand, like, hey, Division One rowing is a route that I could see myself pursuing when I get to that point of choosing where I want to go? What are those? Take that wherever you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about 20-hour weeks and thinking about training at the top NCAA level, I think also a lot of high schoolers that are oftentimes spending about 20 hours at practice, but we also get to train for 20 hours. So we're not just taking the bus to practice and rowing, taking the bus back, and all that adds up to 20 hours. We're doing 20 hours of training every week, and we can. And so thinking about what that looks like, and are they someone who's going to be able to do that, and is also interested in that, because that's training at a really high level. I mean, you look at national team athletes and they are training more than that, but Division One level is going to be a heck of a lot closer to that than it is to thinking about training at a different level. And so, yeah, are you someone who wants to be putting a ton of time and effort and work into achieving these athletic goals, working with your team, get into that top level? Are you committed to working at that level? And also, can you do that as a really high functioning student athlete? And that's a question that we often get as recruiting coaches: is like, is there can I be in pre-med, or can I be an engineer, or can I double major in IR and Spanish? And the answer to all of those at Bucknell is absolutely yes, you can do that. But then if someone says, is that doable? I say, sure. Is it easy? No, absolutely not. No one's going to sit here and tell you that being a really top tier athlete and student is going to be easy. It takes a ton of time management and hard work. And these athletes are working, just all day long, because they've got a morning lift, they're in classes, they've got some training to do on their own, they've got to go to office hours, they're back at practice again this afternoon. Like, they are booked all day long, and so it's about being a really high functioning individual and then optimizing that as a student athlete and thinking about, like, is that what I want to do? And knowing that that's also year round. When you think about rowing at a different level in college, that may look a little bit different throughout the course of the year. It may be some more self-directed training, and maybe that's something that is more someone's speed, or appeals to them more. Because when we talk about Division One, it really is from the beginning of the school year all the way through to the end. And so thinking about how do you do those really well, and that's through midterms and finals and everything else.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point because it's like, what do you want your college experience to look like? Do you want it to feel like, okay, well, you got to get good grades, so you got to be at class every day, but now let's stack on this commitment to something, in the athletic field that is bigger than yourself, and you want to be part of this team and be successful there and contribute to the team, right? Why else, spend 20 hours a week contributing or, being a part of something that you're, not striving to actually, be successful in. So I think those are very valuable things that athletes can hear at any Division One program, right? This isn't just Bucknell or teams that are competing at different levels. Like this is Division One rowing, where you have different tiers within that, right, and competitiveness and all these different things, but expect that it's it's a commitment that you have to understand, and ask the question of, are you ready or is that something that you want in your college experience? Where do academics fit into the? I want to talk about timeline and recruiting timeline and all these different things. I think that's going to be a fun conversation as well. But Bucknell's a very good school. Like the Patriot League schools are all, academics is very much at the forefront of being being a student and a student athlete at that school, right? Bucknell is a school that's on a lot of people's radar because it offers very competitive athletics combined with high achieving academics, right? You highlighted the engineering and all these other programs, right? Like, where does academics fit into the equation from the sense of recruiting and like for high school athletes out there? I think one of the things I hear often is like, not I don't hear often, but like, rowing is going to get me into college and rowing is going to do this, but you still got to be academically in a good spot in order for you to stand behind that recruit in the admissions process, in order for you to feel like this is someone who makes sense at this school and is actually going to be successful, bearing the load of athletics and academics stacked together. Where does that fit into the recruiting equation for high school athletes, who are thinking as a student first, hopefully to try to get the grades to be able to go to a school like that?
Yeah, I mean, everyone should be student first, and every recruit who seems apologetic when they say that, I always say, no, that's right. No one's really getting a pro deal here to go play professional rowing after college. So you gotta be a really great student, and that needs to be the focus. And so it's about doing both really well together. And I think you're exactly right about academics, because you never want to be recruiting someone who it's such a stretch for them to be an academic fit for the school that then they're really struggling through 4 years, because that's not a good place, and that doesn't put them in a good position as a student, and also doesn't put them in a good position as an athlete. If there's someone who is always struggling in class and needing to go for extra help just to try to keep up in classes, that's really tough. And so you want people who are going to be a really great academic fit at the institution, because they can handle the course load, they can handle the academics. And again, none of it's easy, but to be someone who's a really good fit then makes a lot of sense for the student athletes that we have here. And so that was advice that I got from a admissions counselor, and I think it really stands true, because you want to make sure that it's an academic and athletic fit. And we talked about athletic fit and like how you fit into the team, and what your role is and how you're a contributor. But same thing academically, you've got to be a good fit so that you feel confident there. Because if you are really stretching either academically or athletically and thinking about your recruiting process, it's important to think about, again, what your experience is going to be like. Um, and so if you want to have all these incredible majors and be in these programs, that's got to be something that works with everything else that you're doing. And so thinking about, again, the fit is so important.
Yeah, so that's very helpful. And I think every athlete can uh, I'm sure parents love to hear that too, right? That's an important one, because getting good grades in school and all that stuff to be successful, and not having to dedicate more time to extra support and all these different things, when you're already pretty busy with your schedule. Talk about. I want to keep. We're gonna circle back around the Bucknell here as well specifically, but broad, again, your experience, at GW, at Hobart, now at Bucknell, as you start to build a class for the future and all these different things, right? Um, Broadly speaking, talk about like and this is going to be really helpful, and I would love for you to narrow in on the women's side of rowing and recruiting. Um, because I think it's a little bit of a different timeline than men's rowing. But on the women's side, just provide people who are have no idea, right? Parents, athletes who are have no idea where to begin in the recruiting process. Talk about what does that timeline look like, as much as you think are the relevant things to discuss. Like, what is the timeline that they should be thinking about in the recruiting process for you as a head coach, and for people who are doing recruiting out there at the 90 plus Division I programs? Like, when does that process begin for high school athletes? What should they be thinking about? Do they need to be, this or that, or, and then we'll talk about kind of the what behind it, right? Like, yeah, ERG scores and competitiveness and, fit in different ways that we just talked about. But what does that timeline look like in the recruiting process for Division I women's rowing?
Sure. I mean, it's getting earlier and earlier. So I think a lot of it is in the early stages is about the student athlete and their parents doing research and really thinking about what are the type of schools, what are the type of teams, what are the things that are going to be really important as they start to look at this list and narrow it down. And you can start talking to coaches, in the summer before your junior year. And so thinking about being ready for those conversations. So thinking about having a list in advance of that, filling out the questionnaires, sending out outreach, and being ready to have conversations about what you're interested in studying, what kind of athlete you are. And again, just like I said earlier, you don't need to have definite answers. You don't need to know your entire life plan when you're 16. But having a sense of like, here's a subject that I really like. That's great. That's a good place to start. Here are things that I'm thinking about studying. Here are passions of mine. Here is who I am as an athlete on this team, so you can have those conversations. And so, yeah, December before your junior year, you get to start having those conversations, and also be thinking about visits. You can do an unofficial visit, which is, anyone else going through the college process. That's what they do too. They go to campuses, they take tours, they talk to people, they get a sense of it. So you should be doing those too, because you can also do some of those close to home and get a sense of like, do I like the small school in the city? Do I like the big school in the suburbs? Do I like Bonehouse that's really close to campus? Do I like just getting a really good sense of like what's important to you and what's out there, what are the different options. And so it's a lot about figuring out your list, and also deciding about the timeline on communication, because I always like to put that ball in the student athlete's hands. They say, what's the communication timeline? I say, I want to hear from you when you have an update. If it's winter training and you're just chugging along and doing the work and there's not a lot to update on, great, keep at it. When you have an update, when you have another 2K, when you have some video of you on the erg, absolutely. Send me a text, send me an email. Let me know about that. Let's set up a phone call. Let's communicate and hear about what's going on there. And then timeline, through the years, the junior year is the really big one right now, women's rowing. And so those unofficial visits and moving into official visits in the spring. And you'll have quite a few folks who are committed throughout their junior year. But also, I always like to stress too with athletes that like, while there's people committing to their junior year and having these conversations early on, that there's never a point when it is way too late to reach out. We would always rather that someone reach out if they're feeling like maybe they weren't sure about their speed, or they weren't sure about if they wanted to row in college or what level they wanted to row in college, or they're just a little bit late to figuring it out because they're not coming from a program that was pushing those timelines for recruiting. That if they still reach out the summer before their junior year, senior year, or senior year, that's all right. We'll figure it out. We'll start talking. We'll get a visit on the books. We would always rather that people reach out later and then we figure out what that looks like, because the timeline is earlier and earlier, but it doesn't mean that it has to end earlier.
I love that you said how you described that whole thing, because I think like that's one of the things that, and I'd be curious to hear from you, like from junior year, summer before junior year, to kind of like February, March, and April, right? When they're kind of like, probably maximizing most of like the training side of things and all these different things. I think one of the things that I'm always, kind of aware of is like athletes get to June, June 15th before their junior year, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm behind. I need to get 1,000 emails out. I need to tell this coach everything about me and tell, like all these different things. And in reality, like at least to what I've experienced is okay. Well, in many ways, I think that period from June 15th of your June before your or junior year to kind of like end of winter of your senior of your not senior junior year, it's kind of like a two-way education phase about from a athlete to rowing program. What's this program about? What am I the right fit? Is this the right fit for me? So on and so forth. And then from a coach to athlete standpoint, who is this athlete? Who is this kid? What are they interested in? Do I think that they're going to be the right fit for me? It's kind of like this two-way education. And, you know, a good portion of athletes, that's kind of the significance of it, right? Yeah, you may get, a couple athletes who are, committing to schools really early into the process, but probably the majority of athletes that process is a little bit extended, or is way longer than we think. And like you said, like just because you may have a change of heart or change of motivation, or you want to go a different route, like send an email, later on in the process, because there still might be opportunity there. Dive a little bit deeper on that. Like, what are your sense, like just like from your perspective and your recruiting, like and I'm just going to throw what I know is not true, but like, is every athlete committing to a school by April of their junior year and they have no chance of rowing at a Division I school of their dreams if they're not, 720, 715, 710 by, April of their junior year, before they start the spring season? Obviously that's an exaggeration, but take that wherever you want. Like what does that process actually look like for athletes? Shed some light on that. Like what does, again, you're going to be starting to develop your first class, under your leadership at Bucknell, but with your recruiting experience, plenty about how that process looks. Shed some light on that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I like the description of it as two-way communication and thinking about that. And I always like to say it's about the fit too, because we're looking for the type of people who are going to be at the class, and we're going to move boats and push the team culture and push the goals. But also, those athletes need to make sure that they also really like the school as well. And so it's about making sure the fit goes both ways. And so that's where the the recruiting calls are so important, is for them to bring great questions that they want to hear about the team, to understand what is it really like to be a part of this team, and then for us as coaches to get to ask those questions about them and understand who they are as a student athlete, and get to know about them as a person outside of rowing and school as well, and to think about how this fit works. And so, yeah, you're right. There's going to be plenty of people who commit early on in their junior year, but that process can keep on going. Early decision one is in November for most places, and so like truly up until then, that's when the recruiting for most places will stop. But it's also not to say, again, that there's going to be options for early decision two or early action or regular decision. And so, of course, we're looking to commit athletes early, and to have folks in the classes. But also, we know that like there's going to be those people who reach out late, or maybe they were someone who didn't have the ERG scores early on, and then all of a sudden they had an incredible winter training junior year, and then they are going 725, and then they've got some more doors open to them. And so those are folks you want to hear from then too. So it's all about like understanding the programs, learning about them. And yes, June 15th is a big important date, but it also doesn't mean that everything happens then, or that you need to communicate with everyone then. But I think also by doing some research beforehand, and I always like to tell high schoolers too that this also includes like following teams on Instagram and trying to figure out who they are and what they're doing, which I know doesn't sound like hard research, but I think it's super important to see who the team is and see who these people are who you're hoping to be a part of for the next couple of years. And that's a big part of it. It's like just getting ready so that you can then have a sense of what you're looking for, have an opinion of what you want your college experience to look like, so you're ready to interact with those coaches and those teams.
And you said something, and when I run back this conversation, I'm going to steal it from you eventually. But when I remember exactly what you said, but the recruiting process starts in June 15th, but it doesn't mean it ends. The timeline ends at whatever time. Like, right, the way you described that, I think, is super valuable, because I think as that timeline continues to get pushed, earlier and earlier, the weight that athletes feel on their shoulders to be a finished product by X date, early in their junior year, like just like you said, like 16-year-olds don't have it figured out. 16, 17-year-olds don't have it figured out, what they want to do in college or where they want to go. And they sure as whatever don't have their, fitness fully developed by that stage too. And I think giving yourself a little bit of a longer time horizon can help you, get some more maturity behind that 2K score, right? And all those different things. So, love that you said that. I think that's super helpful, super valuable. I want to shift gears a little bit, right? Again, I want to be conscious of your time and what we got going on, but like, as we shift to, because again, anyone, like, just run back that last 30 minutes or so, recruiting and stuff like that, right? Katy, what you kind of shared, like, I think is super, important for athletes, parents, high school coaches who are looking to help, navigate the athletes on their program. Shifting gears for you, Bucknell, first semester in, essentially, right? You're about to kind of cap off the fall and all these different things with the fall. But like, my first question for you, because again, Bucknell is a school that comes onto the radar with, again, I'm here in Philadelphia, and there's many colleges around that have Division I women's rowing. You can kind of branch that out and extend that out far beyond Pennsylvania and the Northeast and so on and so forth. But Bucknell's a school that always comes up on the radar as a school that I think is very attractive because of the athletics, but also the academics, maybe a little bit about where it is, in the campus and all that. What attracted you to the school? What attracted you to the program? Initially, both from a rowing program standpoint, but then from Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Like, what about the the environment, the campus said, hey, I think this is the next step in my coaching, and I think I can be successful here in building a program the way I want. Talk about that. What attracted you to that area? And then we'll talk a little bit specifically about the team itself.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you mentioned earlier was about the Patriot League being such an academically focused league, and I think that's one of the big things that I really loved here. Is just thinking about when I saw the job posting and thinking about going after it. Was thinking about the type of people who are going to be here and be on campus, be part of the team, and that's everyone associated with the team. And so it's been really neat to get a sense of town and meet folks here, and hear about everything that's going on campus, not just the team. And so it's a great little town. It's a couple hours from everywhere, it feels like. So it's, easy driving distance for most folks to come see their student athletes here. And there's wineries all around. There's incredible hiking. It's a great little town. There's a rail trail. So I think it's a really great place to spend 4 years for college. And in my mind, it's another place that's really best of both worlds. It's a small college, small to medium. So we've got just about 4,000 undergrads. And so thinking about what that looks like with high level athletics is really special. There's not a lot of places that kind of fall within that niche of the 9-to-1 professor to student ratio, or I probably did that backwards. But we've got small classes, we've got small campus. And then also really high level athletics. And so to get to do both of those is pretty special. You're not going to be lost as a number on campus. You're not going to be having that experience where you're not quite sure kind of where you are. And we've got people who are involved in so many different neat things. And so it's a school and a town that's so thoroughly invested. I mean, the town of Lewisburg is Bucknell. And so getting to hear about everyone's involvement with campus. I mean, we moved in here, and the first person I met was my next door neighbor who went to Bucknell decades ago and came here for one of the athletic teams and never left. And so hearing about stories like that and getting a sense of the school and campus has been really neat. And I think that goes for town, it goes for campus, it goes for the team. It's just been a really fantastic environment and community to just jump right into.
And I think that's great because again, like it's when I pull it up on the map, it's kind of just far away enough for athletes, for kids to think like, okay, like I'm getting far enough away from home to feel, again, I'm speaking more from Philadelphia area, right? 2.5 hours or so. It's far enough away from home to feel like I'm kind of going away to college, but it's not so far where if I ever need anything or we just want to kind of get out for a weekend and go home, it's not so far away. So I think that's an added value. I think, let me reverse that question to now the athletes, the kids on your team who you've had the chance to get to know and learn from. But even, as you kind of think about the recruiting process and starting to build your class for the future, or for future classes, to kind of come into the mix, in upcoming years. What do you think are like the things that kind of, yeah, a lot of it's going to be very similar. But from a student standpoint, like what are some of the things both from a program and a campus and school standpoint that like are really attractive to, for, you know, I guess the athletes on your team, not to speak for them, but like what are some things that you've sensed in your first few months there that really makes that place, what it is, and why people want to go there?
I think it's a lot about the town. It's a lot about the investment in the student athletes here, and so for them, they are in these incredible classes. They get close relationship with professors. They get to study exactly what they want to study. Um, it feels like maybe it's not quite half, but it feels like quite a few of my seniors right now are in the midst of applying to med schools and taking the MCATs. We've got one who's already in, a couple more who are about to be. So they get to do these incredible things and chase their academic and professional passions. Um, and so for them also being in this town is a really great place, and so they've got the local connections. They've got an incredible alumni network, especially within our school of management. Like that's one of the big ones that we really talk about quite a bit. Is every student within the Freeman School of Management gets a student mentor and an alumni mentor. So they've got this incredible backing. And for me, it's those students who are really clear about their academic direction. And again, not that they need to know exactly what they're doing, but they've got a sense of what they want to study, the direction of what they want to go. They're really passionate about a couple of different topics and know that that's what they want to do and know they want to row at a really high level too. And so those are the folks who are going to do really well here. And yeah, a lot of them are from a couple hour drive, New England, Mid Atlantic, even the Midwest. We seem to be just a couple hours from quite a few places. So I think it's a great place for student athletes who are in those areas. And we've got so many incredible rowing teams within this, chunk of the country. So we get to pull from there. And they are people who are really passionate about what they want to study and how they want to row at that top level at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, again, it's a school that I always hear about, that it's very attractive for athletes. And again, regardless of where you are, I think, it probably is a school that people want to see regardless of where they are in the country. Now, two more questions as we kind of as we wrap up here, but paint the talk about the vision. You talked a little bit about it, right when we started, in the early part of the conversation. But talk about the vision for, okay, you're here, you're wrapping up the first semester. Obviously, you wouldn't have taken this job if you weren't in it for the long run and to actually build something and all these different things. Like, what does that vision look like for you as a coach? And then maybe also, for, both the short term with the athletes that you have on the roster today, but then branching that off of into your long-term vision as you kind of really establish your foundation at Bucknell and, trying to get to whatever heights that you're looking to seek as the head coach. Couple those two together, right? The athletes and you as a coach, what does that vision look like?
Yeah, I mean, when I met with folks here on campus during the interview process this summer, it was very clear that they wanted to bring in a coach that could bring the team back to the top of the conference, and that's of course it's any coach's goal. That's what we're all trying to do. But it was great to hear when I met the athletes that was what they were thinking about, but they also knew that they needed to be thinking about, just like you said, there's kind of short-term and long-term goals. And so like, what are their goals right now? What are their goals for this year? And then where do they see the program going? And also for some of those athletes, they're seniors and they're thinking about, what can I do to start this process? What can I do to be a part of this team this year? And then what can I do as an alumni after that to support the team? And so it's a lot about, thinking about where the goals of the team are, and also who's here right now. Where can we go? And so we've been doing a lot of work thinking about how are we rowing? What's the culture? How are we training? How are we treating each other? What are all the things that go into how fast boats go? Because really, at the end of the day, that's what we're about. But there's a million things that go into how fast boats go. And so thinking about what that looks like for this year, the goal that they've all been speaking about is to have every boat medal at the conference. And I love that goal because I think that's a goal that's big, and I think it's a big push for them. But I also think it's something they can do. So I'm excited that that's their goal for this year, and then to be moving up with the conference after that. And so that's as a coach, my goals are always to support their goals, to make sure that we can get to them or do, like I said earlier, leave no stone unturned to make sure that we do everything possible to get as close as we can. So that's the goal for this year, and then I'm excited to see how the team continues to grow and build and move forward, because I think this is a school and a in terms of student athletes, but also a school in terms of administration and professors and staff that has a really high ceiling in terms of performance. And so that's why it's a big part of why I'm here, because I see a lot of potential for where a team at Bucknell can go.
Yeah. Oh man, this is awesome. Such a fun conversation. I think last thing, right? And then again, like we'll kind of wrap things up. I'll let you get on with the rest of the day and practice this afternoon. Advice that you have, right? Last question, but advice that you would have for someone who is, again, if anyone runs back the last 30 minutes, the amount of advice that you put in there was incredible. But the like what a piece of advice would you have for an athlete who is just starting the recruiting process, wants to run college, is curious about, any school out there, is that the right fit for me? And I got to start to do the things now to help better prepare myself for that, whether that is on the college planning side, recruiting side, training side, you name it. Take that wherever you want, but advice that you would have for any athlete who is trying to start this process of hoping to be one day, rowing at a Division I program, regardless of where that is.
Yeah, I think keep doing the work, be an amazing student, be an amazing athlete. Really focus on that. That's going to be your main focus still. But then as you start to think about the college process, do the research, and that means looking at the website. That means looking at the Instagram. That means talking to people on the team. That means reaching out to the coaches. That means filling out the questionnaires. But have a really good sense of what these teams are and who, where they're going, who's on the teams. What are they trying to do as a team, and make sure that you really know which teams you are feeling like you align with, and keep communicating, keep asking questions. When you get ready for these phone calls, have some really good questions ready, and always be ready to sit there, pause for a second, say, hang on, I got to look at my notes. I got a question I want to ask you, coach. Excellent. We love to hear that. So make sure you're ready for those calls, and think about those as an investment in where you're going and what your college career is going to be like. Because you want to make sure that you are excited about the team, excited about the coaches, the school. And it always has to fit that test of like, what if rowing for some reason is not going to be for 4 years for you, for whatever reason? Is the school a great fit otherwise? So you've got to make sure that that school and those academic programs and everything else feels like a fantastic fit, and that the rowing feels like an excellent fit. So be someone who's doing the research on all those different areas. And I know that's a ton of work, but it's also really worth the investment. And so making sure that you are ready for those calls, ready to make the decision, keeping your family in the loop as you have these conversations so you can make a decision. Because at the end of the day, too, it ends up being a family conversation and decision about where you're going to go to college. And so have your information ready, have those conversations. And at the end of the day, when we do have recruiting calls, we're just talking about rowing in school. So I know they're stressful, but they shouldn't be all that stressful. So you should enjoy them. You should get to talk about rowing, talk about the cool things you're doing in school, and try to really enjoy that process.
Wow. I love that. That's great. Great place to wrap things up. I think anyone, kind of listen to that piece again, because, I think there's some very valuable information in there. And I think helpful for athletes and parents as they navigate this process, especially that last part, right? We're just talking about rowing. It's just rowing, right? Like keep it in perspective, have a good engaging conversation, but go all in because it's worth the journey. Katy, any last things for us? Any place that, hey, if athletes are interested in connecting, or parent, or people are interested in learning a little bit more about Bucknell, any last pieces for that people should know if they do have any interest in learning a little bit more about what you guys have going on up there, that they should know about before we wrap up?
Yeah, find us on bucknellbison.com or on Instagram, and follow us and reach out, because I've been excited to talk to all recruits.
Awesome. We will put both of those in the show notes for people to click right to. And this was awesome, Katy. I loved kind of learning from you. I always ask questions that I'm very curious about and to hear new perspectives on. And I'm sure younger athletes and parents, especially, and high school coaches even, are curious about as well. And I think incredibly valuable information. You guys are only 2.5 hours out from Philly. And I say this a lot, but you guys are close enough where I have to definitely take advantage of it. If there's ever an opportunity for me to come out that way and ride the launch and see what's going on up there when it gets warmer. Maybe not right now, but when it gets warmer, I'm a warm weather person. I'll certainly hopefully take advantage of that. But again, thank you so much for the opportunity to just learn from you and hear about Bucknell and the journey that you're just beginning. And I'm excited to see how winter progresses as you guys work your way through the spring. But again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Kevin.